Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're an oldie, welcome back. So today we're going to be working on this beautiful Minnie Mouse cake topper, which is made from fondant. It's sort of 3D, but it lays flat on the side of the cake. For this project, you're going to need a couple of items. You're going to need some colored fondant in black, white, red, and ivory or fresh stone. You're going to need some edible glue, some CMC or Tylose, a rolling pin, some oval and round cutters. You're also going to need a ball tool, a craft knife, and some hard cutters as well, a small turntable, and a bowl for shaping the head. That's also the photo we'll be referencing. So let's get started. First, we're going to take some black fondant and use the small bowl to shape it. Be sure to knead your fondant properly to make sure it's smooth and stretchy. Here, I made the mistake of not oiling my bowl with the shortening, and so the fondant got stuck. I had to redo it again, so make sure you grease your bowl with the shortening before placing it in the fondant and shaping it. Okay, for the next part, unfortunately, I lost the footage, so I'm just going to try to explain what I did as best I can. So using the hard cutter on the right, I made a marking on the front of the head to measure where I would cut out the heart-shaped part of the face. So after doing that, I used my craft knife to take out a little bit of the black fondant to give it like an indentation round, forming the shape of Mickey's face. Use the photograph for reference. After doing that, I used the ivory fondant to roll it flat and use the same heart-shaped cutter to cut out some fondant and fill up that space which I had already taken out of the black fondant. Be sure to blend it in as much as possible and make sure it looks, as close to the photo as possible. Alright, so to form the mouth or the cheeks and jawline area, I took a piece of the ivory fondant and made a long strip, making sure to make the area where the nose points up pretty obvious and vivid. Then use the rolling pin to stretch it out so it could wrap all around the jawline and underneath the chin. And then I placed that piece of fondant on the face, blended it in as much as possible, glued it on. And here I'm just smoothing it down to make sure it's all filled up and there are no spaces and the lines are straight. I'm using all my tools to make sure it gets as perfect as possible. Just keep working on this until you're satisfied with how it looks and it's good to you. Anyways, use the photo as reference. And here I'm just cutting off the excess and smoothing it over to make sure it's well blended. Alright, moving on. Next, to form the mouth of the smile, I'm taking a shaping tool and drawing a curve across the mouth area. I'm using my bowl tool here to round it up and using my craft knife to give it an indentation to look like the smile where her cheeks bulge up. So I'm just working on this to make it look neat and as close to the picture as possible. So use whatever tools you have available to make it satisfactory. Use your picture, keep referring to the picture as reference, and here I'm just making sure the nose area is pointy and it all looks balanced. Okay, next to work on the eyes, I'm taking an oval cutter, using some of my white fondant to cut out 2 ovals. And I'm going to use the same oval cutter to mark out where I want the eyes to go. But before that, because the Minnie Mouse eyes are a bit oblong and, you know, not perfect oval shape. Just using my fingers here to stretch them out to make sure they look similar to the picture. And here I'm marking the position where I want the eyes to be with my oval colors, and then I'm going to glue them on. But before that, I'm using my bowl tool to create an indentation so the eyes appear as if they're inside the face and not on top of the face. So I added a little bit of glue and then stuck the eyes on. To make the nose, I'm using the exact same oval cutter and some black fondant. Here I'm rolling it into a thick shape and I'm pressing down with my fingers to give a smooth edge. So I'm just going to cut out the nose and shape it with my fingers so there are no sharp edges, and make sure that I like the shape. I'm taking it down a little bit just to make sure it's the perfect size and depth. I don't want it sticking out of the face too much. So here I'm rounding it up with my fingers and gluing it on. Next, I'm going to take a little bit of white fondant to make a tiny oval, which I'm going to flatten with my fingers and place on the left side of her nose. Make sure to press down so it's smooth and it blends into the shape of the nose. So for the eyes, I'm taking 2 tiny pieces of fondant, rolling them into ovals and flattening them with my fingers. I'm going to take the oval cutter and take off one edge of each of those shapes to give it like a teardrop shape, and then place them on the left side as well of her eyes, looking up. So now that I'm satisfied with that, I'm going to move on to making the eyelashes. So to make the eyelashes, I decided to use fondant instead of paint them on because it's just a lot less messy and it gives me the freedom to, you know, maneuver as much as I like until I get the perfect shape. I'm just rolling the fondant here into a really tiny string and cutting it into 6 equal parts. To give the illusion of lashes, I'm going to be thinning off one edge of each of those strips, using my fingers to roll it on my palm to give it like a pointy end so it looks like an eyelash. I did this for all 6 pieces, and I'm going to attach using some edible glue, just adding a little bit so it's not shiny. And I'm going to be using my craft knife to pick it up and place it. So first I'm attaching the longest lash, which is in the middle, and then attaching 2 shorter lashes on either side, all curving to the outer side of her face. Now on the picture you'll notice that it's curved inwards, but I just liked it this way, so I did it this way. So I did the same thing for the second eye, and placing the longest lash in the center first and then 2 shorter lashes on either side. You can trim them as you go. If you notice it's too long, you can take a little bit off from the bottom until you're satisfied with how it looks. And that's it. To make the ears, I rolled out a piece of black fondant to about 1/4 of an inch, and then I cut out 2 circles. I couldn't find my circle cutter that gave the exact size I wanted, so I just used the cover of a container I had to make the outline, and I used my craft knife to cut out the shapes. So I'm using my fingers here to smooth out the edges to make sure there are no rough looking edges. And then I used my fingers to press a circle on the inner part of the shape to make it have like a 3D effect instead of just a flat circle. I did that for both ears, and here I'm just going to use my cover to take out 2 sections of the circle on either side of the head where the ears are going to sit. That's so that they can sit flat on the sides of her head. And here I'm just placing it on the shape to make sure they sit properly. Now you'll notice I'm not gluing it down, and that's because I'm mounting this to the side of a cake, so I'm going to want it to sit perfectly on the cake. So I'll glue it down when I assemble it with the cake. Next, to make her bow, here I added a little bit of Tylose to the red fondant, and I'm rolling it out to about 1/4 of an inch as well, or slightly thinner. And to make the poke, then I'm going to cut out the length of the bow that I want, which is slightly higher than the length from her head to the tip of her ears. And then to make the polka dots, I'm rolling it a little bit of fondant really thin and using my tiny circle cutter to cut out a bunch of polka dots. Next, I'm gluing those polka dots onto the red piece of fondant which we cut out. Now, because the fondant is still really soft and tacky, I didn't really need much glue, so I just placed them how I wanted them to be arranged, and then used my fingers and pressed them into the fondant. Now I'm going over this several times to make sure that the polka dots are properly adhered to the red fondant underneath, and that they are flat on top, so it looks like it's part of like a fabric or piece of fabric instead of looking like it's on the fabric. I'm doing the same thing to the remaining piece of fondant which we cut out, which we're going to be using for her dress, the little part of her dress that shows behind her arms in the photo. Alright, so to make the bows, what I'm doing is cutting the strip into 3 parts, which is going to be either side of the bow and the part of the fabric that goes across the bow. So I'm just cutting each side, I'm folding it over and cutting it into sort of like a triangle. Here I am using my fingers to fold in the edge of the bow to give it a more seamless look, as well as the slightly poofy look that Minnie Mouse bow has. So I'm just opening it up here, folding off the edge. I'm doing the same thing, cutting into a triangle and folding the edges on the other half as well. I'm doing the same thing on the strip of fondant that's going to go in between the bow as well. Next, to assemble the bow, I'm going to use a little bit of paper towel to help hold the shape, and I'm putting glue on either end, rolling up the paper towel and using that to hold its shape. And at the end, I'm just going to pinch the bow into sort of like a W to give it a slight crease in the center, and I'm using my paintbrush here at the end of my paintbrush to lengthen the crease as well. I'm doing the same thing to the other bow, forming the W and giving a crease as well. So here I'm just going to give it some more creases on the ends just to give it life instead of making it look flat and dull. And I'm measuring here to see if the length and the position of the bow is good as well, which it fits perfectly. So I'm just checking to make sure that it's going to sit well on her head, shaping the bow as I go, and adjusting the paper towel as well to make sure it dries in the right shape. Next, I'm going to attach the bow by using the strip in the center to hold the 2 pieces together, flipping it over, pressing down, putting some more glue on there, and then sealing it at the back and cutting the excess off. I'm making sure to press down to make sure it's properly sealed and it won't be going anywhere. Here I'm just placing it back on her head so it dries in the perfect shape. And that's it for the bow. So for her dress, I'm just taking my craft knife and cutting like an oval sort of shape. The end is going to go underneath her head, so I don't have to perfect that place. So I'm using my palette knife here to lift up the head and place it under just to make sure it's right. So to make her arms, I'm taking 2 equal parts of black fondant to form ovals, and then I'm going to flatten off one end and make the end where her elbows are a bit pointy and round it off. To make her hands, I'm going to use some white fondant, which also has tylose in it. I'm kneading it to make sure it's perfectly soft and flexible. So I'm cutting it into 2 parts. I'm just rounding off one end and making it oblong. I take my palm and flatten the wider end. Use my craft knife to cut 3 fingers, making sure to take out the tiny section where the smallest finger is supposed to be. Now I'm just taking my fingers and shaping her fingers as much as possible, using my craft knife to make the creases in her fingers. I'm smoothing up the tips, making sure they look ladylike. I'm just rounding them off to make them look like real fingers. Here I'm also extending the length of the fingers to make sure I can get in all the folds and creases, making them as close to the picture as possible. I'm just going to keep working on this until it looks a really good replica of what's in the photo. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to place that on the side of her face to make sure it actually looks good in size and the proportions and everything. And then I'm just going to repeat that for the other hand as well. Here I'm placing the second hand on the face to make sure it looks good, and the position of the right hand is slightly different. One of her fingers is touching the side of her mouth, so I'm just making sure to adjust the fingers as closely as possible to the photo to make sure it looks good. To form the edge of her glove, I'm just taking a little bit of white fondant and adding some tylose to it. Next, I roll it up into a ball, cut it into 2 halves, and form oval shapes with either half. Now I'm placing the arm on it to make sure it matches the size as well as the space in between the arm and her head. So I'm cutting off a little bit of her arm in like a diagonal position so it slides right under the edge of her glove. I'm using my ball tool to make an indent so the palm fits right in there, and that looks good. So I'm doing the same thing to the other side as well. Now, because the other hand slightly sticks on her face, I'm not going to make it as low as the other one, making it slightly higher so it lifts up her palm. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful to you. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to press the notification bell as well, and leave your comments below. Let me know what you think and what you'd like to see from me. Bye.